Hey, good evening, and welcome to another week of Old Testament. Hope you're enjoying the class. I'm enjoying learning alongside of you and appreciate all the effort that you have done thus far. And so this week we're going to start really diving into another section of the Old Testament. And remember, as we've talked about, that the Old Testament is divided up into general sections. And the one thing that I really stressed since week one is the fact that you can't just simply read the Old Testament like Genesis until Malachi, but that it's broken up in different sections. And also there's different types of writings in the Old Testament. And, today we begin looking at the concept of what's known as prophecies. And this is when we'll start to see 15 unique and individual prophets who will complete a major portion of the Old Testament. Now, let's start with kind of understanding what was a prophet, if you will, in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, a prophet basically meant a messenger, someone who was coming to bring news, but not just any news, but this person was called specifically by God to be a messenger of God who was going to come and speak on God's behalf. So these prophets, when they're speaking on behalf of God. And if you go to a courtroom, you have a lawyer, and a lawyer speaks on behalf of you. The lawyer knows the law. He or she understands how things work. And it's the same way with a prophet. A prophet is speaking from God. They know God. And so God has given these individuals the words to say. So if you look at where we are, getting into Isaiah and Jeremiah and things of these prophets, we've read about the books of Samuel and Kings, and we have seen the tragic failure of Israel. I mean, you just look at them and you think, what were you thinking? Why did you do what you did? But Israel at this point is basically a failure. Everything that God had desired is no longer in place. They have enjoyed a special partnership with God, and basically they've thrown it all away. Even though they knew through the law, through Moses, they knew that they were a covenant people, that they were a special group of people. They have had a very hard time fulfilling their end of the covenant. These people have chosen to disregard what's God's wishes, God's will, if you will. And so we start to see prophets, and you'll see it through Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah. And by the way, Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. And Jeremiah, in which we find some of the greatest, most memorable passages of the Old Testament. Jeremiah 29, which says, "For I know the plans that I have for you." That we see that written on all of these little cutesy little things they put, that you put on your desk, or you have the Bible verse, that's memorized. "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. They are plans to prosper you." All of that is written in a time in which Jeremiah is weeping because the covenant people have chosen to disregard what God desires, what God wants to do. And then you're going to start getting more of these prophets. Amos comes around, and Hosea, and they basically warn these individuals that, listen, you are losing something very valuable. You're going to lose a precious relationship with God because you continue to worship Him exclusively. You have other gods, and God has specifically said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And you're continuing to do this. And then we start seeing Micah and Isaiah, and they come in and basically say, listen, unless you learn to behave justly, and unless you seek to worship Yahweh alone, you're going to suffer. And then an interesting prophet, it's a very hard name to pronounce, Habakkuk. Habakkuk comes in along with Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and they basically say, hey, the ruling class, you guys are causing problems because you're exploiting the poor. You're not treating the widows and the children and those who have less. You're not taking care of them. You're not looking out for them. And therefore, you are going to lose a relationship with God because you choose to disregard the covenant and the relationship that is coming to them. And now what makes the prophets I guess difficult to read maybe is that it's written in poetry. Sometimes it's got images of metaphors, and you really have to wrestle with it, right? You have to think through it because it's these vivid metaphors and figures of speech, and you it's it's one of those things where you can't just read through it and say, boom, I got it, I understand it, but it takes time to sit down and to study it and to really understand. But it's powerful because Jeremiah, once again, he talks about God wanting to restore a new covenant with his people. Now, the prophets, they speak about times of present, right? They're trying to bring Yahweh's God's people into harmony with God and to follow the covenant and the obligations that come with that. However, there's some interesting things that we find through some of these, not necessarily through the prophetic literature, but through some of the prophecies that are made. I want to show you two slides that kind of speak to this. First of all, here, Zechariah, where we find a lot of these, but these are some of the prophecies that we'll start to see in being fulfilled in the New Testament, that we'll learn about when we look at Introduction to the New Testament. So some of the Old Testament prophecies, these are relating to Jesus, and specifically about Jesus. And you can kind of see, make a triumphal entry into Jerusalem, betrayed by a friend for 30 pieces of silver. You can see his side would be pierced. There's from the cross. His dying words foretold. What did Jesus say on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That this individual from Hosea, chapter 6, verse 2, would rise from the dead on the third day. Another chart that is very interesting here, and I'll try to move this over so you can see it, that you would see that he would be born of a virgin. There's Old Testament prophecy, Isaiah, Micah, Isaiah. So you start to see that in these, the words of the prophets, not only is it real time for them, but there's also the aspect of what is to come. That the Old Testament will not be the final say by God. But that there will be a new way, a new command that will be given. So when you're reading the prophets, it is hard. It's a little complicated, but it is so rich in beauty with what is to come and how it impacts people of today, and knowing that God desires that no matter how bad we are, that he loves us and he wants to have a relationship with us. So hopefully that's just a little help for you as we journey throughout this week. Just a few additional words about your assignments for this week. What you will basically have is a discussion forum. And your reading questions. Both of these are due on Thursday. So I know that it says initial on November 17th, but based on our conversations, both of these are due on Sunday. But for your initial form, as we look at this today, when you look at the work of Isaiah, I think that this is so important, especially being that we've just had some elections here. And, I want you to think about Isaiah's counsel that he gives in chapter 7. And this is during a Israelite and Syrian conflict. And you have this individual who comes and gives counsel. And you have to ask yourself, if you're the king, do you listen to it? Do you ignore it? Is there a hidden agenda that is there? And so you want to answer these questions first. And then let's put it into the context for today. And I have this article that is that concerns Billy Graham, who was one of the greatest evangelists of all time. But Billy Graham also had a strong relationship with all of the presidents from a long time ago. And, what we want to start asking is, in reading this article, should local, state, federal government leaders retain the counsel of church leaders to make decisions? Should decisions be based on moral or especially biblical advice? Is there danger with that? Is it full of wisdom? What's your thoughts? I look forward to reading from you. And so that's one assignment that you have. The other assignment that you'll have this week as we go through will be some reading questions based on the chapter readings of prophetic literature. And there's only 5 of those this week, but I really invite you to take some time. And we've talked about the weeping prophet, but also Jeremiah the suffering servant as well, and just really getting to understand the pain that comes in some of the writings. As always, I'm here to help you. I look forward to hearing from you, and let me know if I can do anything. Take care. Hope you have a great week.